We're going to call the meeting to order. First thing we're going to do, I need to call the roll call. Ruben Weiss.
Here.
Alderman Shannon Watzik. Alderman Deborah Middleton. Kendra Sellos. Hello.
Here. Here.
Cindy Durham. Cindy.
Yeah.
Okay, let it be documented that all members are present at this time, but Deborah, I think she's gonna show up in a few minutes, but we just have one agenda item today. That's the discussion of the possible action of the wastewater rate study presentation by Chris Neal of Community Unlimited. I guess at this time, Chris, you got the floor.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, everybody. Let me start off with just a brief reintroduction to Communities Unlimited, since it's been a while since you heard the first introduction of like a year ago. We are a private nonprofit organization with headquarters in Fayetteville, Arkansas. But we work all across 7 states across the South and Midwest, including, of course, Texas. There are now 11 of us working here in Texas in different parts of the state. Our basic mission is to assist rural communities with the water supply and wastewater issues that they are confronting. And we get into a number of different technical assistance tasks. Rate studies is just one of them. As you'll see in the draft final report that I'm presenting you tonight, there are other areas of assistance available that you may be interested in following up on later. But at any rate, briefly in a nutshell, that's where I'm coming from. Our services to the city of Seagraves are provided at no cost to you because we are basically a grant-funded entity. My own salary is paid through grants from the Department of Health and Human Services, EPA, and USDA Rural Development. So you will not see any bill for services at the end of this. So with that introduction, I guess we can dive right into it. And what I'll do is I think I will share my screen and let me know, everybody, if you can see it when I share it. Host disabled. Okay, it says here, host disabled participant screen sharing. Can you change that, Dan? Dan? I believe you're on mute, Dan.
I think you just have to do hit the share button, I believe.
Yeah.
When I hit the share button, it says host participant screen sharing.
Well, what I've got is that one participant at a time may share.
Okay.
There we go. Here we go. Now you should be able to.
Okay, let me try again. Okay, great. Yeah, it looks like it's working.
Okay, sorry about that. Go ahead.
That's okay. Not a problem. Okay. So let's see if I can you all see that City of Seagraves sewer rate study outcomes?
No, not yet.
Not yet? Oh. Okay, how about now?
Yeah.
Okay. Everybody can see that?
Yes.
Okay, great. Let me make it bigger then, and there we go. So I will briefly take you through the outcomes of this rate study. This is a very short presentation, but it may raise a number of questions. I have all the time in the world to patiently address any questions you may have, as well as any comments or suggestions that you may have that I want to incorporate in the final report. This is a draft final report. I always like to do it this way, present a draft final report to the governing body first to get your input, and then hopefully use your input to produce the final report, which will come a little bit later. So let's dive right into this. Okay. Okay. Brief word on what goes into doing a proper rate study. There really are a number of ingredients and different data sources that we rely on. Obviously, starting with your current tariff schedule and also recent audit reports. But if I had to point to two of the most ingredients, it would be these. Your historical consumption over a recent period of months or years, and then also your utility budget data. Those two items are really key because the historical consumption data will help us get a handle on anticipated news going forward, assuming, of course, that future consumption will look like recent historical consumption. And then that's on the revenue side. And then on the needs side, the budget, the system budget outlines what your actual monetary needs are. So what we want to do in the end is break even between the two, or have revenues just slightly above your budget. So that's our aim. We want to, in carrying out this process, we want to adhere to several basic principles, which I'll just briefly outline. First of all, we are committed to what's called full cost pricing. The price of services, the fees that are charged to your customers should, in the aggregate revenues, should cover the full cost of running your system. There shouldn't be a shortfall. There shouldn't be interagency transfers from another fund in the city in order to subsidize the sewer system. That goes on in some communities, so that's why I mentioned that. So full cost pricing is really essential. So the people are paying for what they get and paying the full cost of it. Second of all, we are committed to providing comprehensive findings and recommendations to you. So if I see other areas of concern, I will certainly point those out to you, or other recommendations not directly related to the rate study itself. A third principle we adhere to is we always want to provide communities with several alternatives. I never come back to a community with one proposed rate schedule and say, this is the direction you have to go in. I prefer to give you alternatives. And as you will see in the draft final report, there are a number of alternatives there. Fourthly, we're always looking for local input, which is essential in order to finalize our draft final report. That's why we're here tonight. I want to hear from you. And then finally, we are solemnly committed to accuracy, to sound judgment, and integrity in our rate analysis exercise. So that's what we're committed to, and I trust these reflect the principles of the city as well. So briefly, let's just take a quick look at what we call your baseline scenario, and that would be your current tariff schedule. This may be a little hard to see. You've got, hopefully you've got the handout in front of you as well, where you might be able to see it better. But we ran this type of analysis for the current status quo, as well as for each of the alternatives that we calculated for you. And basically what you mainly want to focus on are the yellow shaded areas. Current status quo under the current rates, which are under a rate schedule there, those produce revenues based on recent historical consumption that would not meet your annual budget. Now this, I want to point out that this is a proposed revised budget not the budget that you've been looking at in recent past years, but rather a new proposed budget, which would now include debt financing for the recently acquired USDA loan award that you received. So looking at that and looking at recent historical consumption figures, you would not be able to meet all of your obligations, not only towards USDA, but meeting all the other costs of running your sewer system. So there's a no right there under break even. Also, I just want to point out, and this was interesting to me, I wanted to try and figure out a way to resolve it. I did figure out a way to at least lessen the problem. This is a secondary problem. You'll see here that given consumption, we would have a target amount of revenue expected from each class of users. And for your lowest users, 0 to 35,000 gallons, we would expect to see them paying only 50% of the total revenues, because they consume roughly 50% of all the sewer, or generate rather 50%. But they're actually paying 85%. That's quite a bit higher. They're carrying much more of the ball than the highest users above 65,000 gallons per month. They generate basically the other half of sewer that is generated, and they only pay in the aggregate about less than 15%. Now, you might want to keep that number in mind. It gets a little bit better in the alternatives, not as much better as I would have liked. But anyway, that's the current status quo. And now all I'm going to show in the PowerPoint presentation itself is the recommended scenario. We can look at the others if you wish. The first three options that I generated, basically, those were based on, going back to the baseline scenario, those were based on your current structure of rate tiers. The first three scenarios were based on that, and they were also based on the base rate covering 0 to or 1 to 35,000 gallons. So we pretty much discarded those alternatives because of the base rate covering too wide a swath of usage from 0 to 35,000 gallons. Really, virtually no communities I've ever seen have that much gallonage under the base rate. So going back to option 5, the recommended scenario, what we're looking at here is a base rate that would cover just the first 10,000 gallons of usage, which is much more in line with similarly situated communities around the state and really around the country. It's the whole tier system is now streamlined to just 2 tiers. After the base rate, 10,000 to 40,000 gallons per month, they would pay 60 cents per thousand. And above 40,000 gallons generated per month, they would pay $1.50 per thousand. These rates are, in fact, substantially higher than your current rates. The base rate is about 93% higher than your current base rate. And the tier rates, well, difficult to compare when you have just 2 tiers compared to what were, I think, 7 tiers, but it's substantially higher. The way I see it, based on the analysis, it would have to be substantially higher. I don't see any way out of it if you are going to cover the costs of your new debt financing and break even with your budget. So, are there any questions so far? Any comments or questions? There will be time for this later. Well, let's move on then. What we're faced with then are four key policy decisions as I see it. Policy decisions which will have to be deliberated and decided upon by you folks. First of all, obviously, select and adopt one of the 5 tariff schedule options. As I said, the other 4 options were not presented here in PowerPoint. However, they are in the draft final report, so you can look at them at your leisure. Second of all, you should make a deliberate decision to implement an emergency reserve account separate from the sewer account. This is a best practice that is highly recommended for any municipal utility, whether it's water or sewer. You should always have an emergency reserve account that you are contributing to on an annual basis. Now, the emergency reserve serves several purposes. Obviously, for those unforeseen short-term emergencies that inevitably come up in any sewer utility or water utility. I think Renee can attest that these things happen all the time, and often they cost a lot of money, and you need money saved up as a rainy day fund so they aren't scrambling trying to get money elsewhere. So I'm recommending an emergency reserve account, which actually has been built into the proposed budget that I used for this rate analysis. So that when I say option 5 rate schedule breaks even, it's breaking even with a budget that already includes a proposed emergency reserve account. The emergency reserve should be maintained as a separate account, separate from your regular sewer account. So it's really treated as a more or less untouchable rainy day fund, which obviously can touch when you need it. And then third policy decision, I strongly recommend that you consider streamlining the tariff schedule by eliminating superfluous tiers like we did in option 5. You had tiers in the current status quo and the current tariff schedule that were basically unused. I mean, nobody was being charged under some of those tiers. So I think it makes a lot more sense to streamline things as much as possible. Finally, the last recommendation, which doesn't have anything directly to do with this rate analysis, but I always tend to recommend this to many communities I work with, you should consider long-term undertaking what's called an asset management plan, which would really help you plan for the future. This is another service that we can provide. I could help you produce an asset management plan for the sewer utility and possibly for your water utility as well. This would take into account an inventory of all your fixed assets and replacement needs over the next 5 to 10 years. And it would ultimately lead to a sensible capital improvement plan in order to, well, plan for the future and plan on replacing what needs to be replaced and figuring out the costs which would feed into future budget planning. So those are the 4 key policy decisions. The last one you don't necessarily have to decide on tonight. The other 3 really are tied to the rate analysis recommendation that I'm offering you today. As I said, I'm happy to take any questions or comments. And I open it to all of you.
I'm really not real sure that I really understand. I was trying to pick up on what was the new minimum base rate was going to be if you use from 0 to 10,000, Joe.
Okay, yeah, I just went back to that here. Can you see where my pointer is?
Yes.
Okay, that would be the new, what I'm calling effective base rate. Okay, I have to give a word of explanation about effective base rate. You have a commercial base rate and a residential base rate, which are different. The proposed option 5 rate schedule the residential base rate would go up to $26. It's $13.50, so it would almost double. The commercial base rate would go up to $29, again, almost doubling the current base rate. For the purposes of mathematical analysis, I have to combine those into one effective base rate, reflecting the fact that 92% of your customers pay the residential rate and only 8% pay the commercial rate. So here's your proposed effective base rate. It says $26.23, but that's just a mathematical composite of the commercial and residential rates, whoops, that I outlined here. And then here are your tiers. After the base rate allotment of 10,000 gallons, then 10,000 or 40,000, it's 60 cents a thousand, and above 40,000, it would be $1.50 per thousand. Again, I can't stress enough, it goes up considerably.
Okay.
But you would be covering all of the true and accurate costs of your sewer system. And I think it would pay to get things aligned now, even though it may be somewhat in the short term, it might be a shock to some customers. But I think it would pay to get this aligned now, and then in the future, make much, much smaller rate adjustments. Customarily, a community should be revisiting its rate schedule really every couple years, making small adjustments as necessary. Unfortunately, that's not the position we find ourselves in here in Seagraves. So we're faced with for one really big adjustment, which later on, won't be repeated, hopefully. Unless you wait another 10 to 15 years to adjust rates again.
Mm-hmm.
Is that clearer, Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, I understand it a little better. Yes.
Okay.
So as a minimum, that's what it's going to really take to have to pay for this loan that we're getting with USDA.
Really, it will. Yes, I can show you. Here, let me get out of this and let me show you in the budget. I assume you can see this as well that I'm showing you right now, right?
Yes.
Okay. Here's the budget. Well, I should emphasize the proposed budget. And we started with a water and sewer budget, which I now understand has been segregated out into a water budget and a sewer budget. But when we started, we had to do some fancy work with the numbers. Renee and Dan and I sat down together and we looked at the numbers and basically parceled out what costs belonged actually to sewer. And then we had to add in, down in yellow here, the new USDA annual debt service, principal and interest, $45,000 a year. You weren't before, now you will be very soon. Plus what USDA requires, which is 10%, which has to be 10% of that debt service, which has to be set aside as what's called a debt service reserve. So that's another $14,500. So those are new costs you weren't facing before. And so that too has to be taken into account. So we were basically, in my analysis, I was basically using this budget of $360,380 for the analysis. Revenues would have to meet that figure. And if I can go back to option 5 here, I'm looking at the Excel spreadsheet now, which you don't have, but you can only see it here on screen. But it's the same thing you have in your handout, really. So there's that $360,380, the budget. Your total revenue from all sources has to at least equal that and really better exceed it by a small margin, which it does here in option 5. And you might also notice that an additional parenthetical note, remember what I told you about who's paying for the lion's share of sewer generated. It used to be 85% paid by the smaller users. Now it would be less than 70%. So that's somewhat better. I mean, that's not down to the 46% that, which is the percent of sewer generated that's generated by them, but it's better than your current status quo.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So, and you break even with the budget with this option 5, as I said.
Is that based on all of the location uses a minimum of 10,000 gallons? What is that based on?
Yes. Option 5 is based on a base rate that would cover the first 10,000 gallons of usage. In contrast to your current situation where the base rate covers the first 35,000. What happened, we want to catch and bill extra for as much of the truly excess sewer generated as possible. And by putting the first 35,000 under the base rate, you're not catching a lot of that excess usage. Really, your typical household is only going to use a few thousand, they're only going to generate a very few thousand gallons of sewerage in a month. So right. Anybody above 10,000 really should be considered excess, and they should be charged at an excess rate. That will, incidentally, I haven't mentioned this yet, but this new policy would incentivize a certain degree of water conservation. And that's one of the secondary objectives here. And certainly as a drought-prone area, you know, where water's at a premium, that's something you ought to be concerned about too. You can help conserve water, not only on the water supply side, but on the sewer side also. If they're paying extra, not only for the water they consume, paying it on their water bill, but also for the outgoing water that they, you know, that goes down the toilet afterwards, and paying that on their sewer bill, that would incentivize consumption. Now I have to recognize also that, you know, these high-end users, the high sewer generators, those are a very small number of businesses in the community, and plus obviously the institutional users, which are mainly the school district.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
In fact, we can take a closer look at that. Hang on here. Account sorted. Just a moment. Bear with me a second here. The highest users here, I think I've got this in order.
No, not those.
Yeah, these are the top 1% of all accounts, and they account for 49% of total sewer consumption, and they include these names here. Seagraves ISD obviously is right there in the top, plus some apartment complexes, and I don't know, you know, who these other individuals are, possibly businesses. You know them better than I do.
Chris,
Yes.
those on the very top, if you remember, we discussed those were some readings that were not put in appropriately and it generated some big numbers. They're fictional. It's not for real.
Okay, right. Oh,
Yeah,
geez, on here, on here, I didn't delete them. I thought I deleted them elsewhere. Okay.
where it starts right past that 1007L, that's where it starts. That's for real.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay. No, I'm glad you pointed that out. That this is why we want to get together. I thought I had made those deletions
Yeah.
of those fictitious or inactive accounts. I will make some appropriate changes. You know, I don't think it will change the outcome a great deal, but I do want to take that into account, and I will make a note of making those changes and giving you some a new readout.
Okay.
Okay. I've made a note of that, Renee. Thank you for
Okay.
pointing that
I'm
out.
sorry.
No, I am sorry, because that was supposed to have been deleted by now, and I thought I had done that. Let me take a
Well,
look
you've
here.
only done 5 rate schedules.
Yeah. Yeah. I will take care of that issue.
Okay. But the rest of those are legitimate. And
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, that will change the numbers somewhat in a couple days. Well, by early next week, I should be able to let you know what changes, how that changes the numbers, and if it's significant. Okay. Are there other questions or concerns from either the mayor or any member of the council?
I don't have anything else.
Okay. Let's see. Can I stop the screen sharing at this point, or do you want to take a look at some of these numbers more closely on screen?
No, I'm okay. I mean, I think I understand it enough.
Okay. You do have it of course, in hard copy in front of you also. So everything I've shared on screen, you also have on paper there.
Yeah.
Okay. I will stop the screen share then, and so now we just see each other. That's pretty much the end of my presentation, but again, I'm welcome to take any other comments or questions. And I will make the change that Renee pointed out. Yeah, I should point out that I'm not necessarily expecting you to to make a vote on a tariff schedule tonight. I wanted you to see the draft final report first, collect your input, and provide the final report with Renee's input. Very importantly, I'll be making that change. Then you would be asked to deliberate upon and vote on the final report, which will look very similar to what you're seeing in front of you, but the numbers might change ever so slightly based on the changes that I need to make.
Yeah. Well, it makes more sense to me now. I know the first report we got out, I didn't understand it at all, and the second one was better, but I understand it better now after you explained it tonight.
Okay. Well, yeah, that's why we want to get together and talk it over.
Yeah.
And if there's anything I can do to make it clearer in the final report, please let me know what was unclear or, what I can improve upon.
Well, okay, well, we really appreciate your time and coming over and explaining the presentation to us. I mean, it helped me better.
Okay.
But that's really probably what we gotta do anyway to pay for our debt. So,
Yeah. Well, pay for the full cost of services provided to the community. Yeah. That's what it comes down to. Yeah, another point that I mentioned in the report that I just want to very briefly mention is once you adopt a rate schedule, whatever you adopt, it's going to be very important going forward to adhere to that rate schedule very closely without making exceptions for particular customers or groups of customers. The rate schedule really should be blind to the payers. That there shouldn't be set rates for specific types of payers. Just commercial and residential. And if you're residential, you get the residential rate. If you're commercial, you get the commercial rate. So I think that's important to underscore as well.
I have one other question. I'm not
Sure.
sure if I understand how the emergency reserve account works.
Okay, well, it really is essentially, the way to look at it is as a rainy day account. It's something you would contribute to every year, $2,000 every year, build it up, and over a period of time, then you will have essentially a rainy day fund, which you would be able to draw upon when you have an actual emergency. And as I think Renee can tell you, these emergencies do come up from time to time. I don't know if you would like to speak to that, Renee, but things do come up.
Okay, I think I follow that.
Yeah. And other than that, you wouldn't touch it. And if you never have an emergency and it starts accumulating too much, maybe you want to stop contributing to it in a particular year. But I would never permanently stop contributing to that rainy day fund. But believe me, you will have emergencies down the road. Usually we cannot foresee them. That's why they end up being emergencies. So this would help cover those costs. And also because you can't always go out and get grant funding to cover an emergency cost.
Yeah.
Often these usually, they can't be covered by grants. You wouldn't find a funder who would do that for you. So you have to have a source of funding to do that. What some communities do in those cases, they do a very quick inter-fund transfer, like out of the general fund, in order to subsidize sewer to cover that emergency. But that's not advisable either, because then you're draining your general fund. And as I said, you're subsidizing the sewer fund. This would be a specific sewer emergency fund.
Okay.
May I ask a question?
Sure.
If say you had an unbudgeted situation where you wanted to extend a sewer line and add manholes, I don't know that would be considered an emergency, but could you use that fund for unscheduled budget cost?
I think that's within the realm of discretion of the city council if they want it to be used that way. It certainly could be, and that's one of the longer term uses of an emergency fund. Yeah, actually, I should rephrase it as simply a reserve fund, because one of the chief purposes is for emergencies, but it can cover many of those types of costs that you mentioned as well. If you can't find outside funding for that type of extension, for example, then this a fund may be very helpful to accomplish that.
Thank you.
Absolutely. As long as the city council is always in the loop on what
Of
the
course.
fund is being used for.
Right. Are there any more questions from any of the council members? So I guess we don't have anything else. Again, we appreciate your explaining the presentation for us.
Okay.
It's something we needed to know, so
Yeah. Well,
thank you again.
I'm glad to be here with you. You will receive the final report probably towards the end of next week, maybe by the middle of next week, only because I'm going on vacation for a couple of days soon. But you'll get that very soon. There aren't a lot of changes to make, and then you can use that as a basis for your deliberations at your next meeting, whether you want to do it in regular session or special session. And if you want me to come in again for the final report, I can certainly do so.
Okay. But thank you for that, but if we do, we'll let you know.
Okay, sounds good. You all take care now then.
Okay,
All right, Chris. Good to see you. You take care.
Okay, thank you then. Can I sign off now?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay,
Bye,
okay. Good
Chris.
night, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Well, we don't have anything else. That's the only item we had tonight, so I guess we need a motion to adjourn.
Y'all don't want to discuss the rate changes?
Cindy?
I thought you needed a motion to adjourn. Renee asked a question.
I was just asking whether or not y'all wanted to discuss it any at all at this meeting.
Shannon
It's
got a
okay with
question.
me.
Shannon got a
Okay.
question.
Before we discuss making any rate changes and raising rates and everything, I think we need to be having another meeting about being full service, city council, city office open. And it needs to be on our next agenda. We need to get this going. It's gone on long enough. Put it on the next agenda meeting list, whatever. But we've got to get that office open, and it's got to be without all the other list
The
of
office is
everything.
open. The office is open.
We've got some discussions that we need to make with that. And before we do the rate changes, we need to discuss some of that further. And I think it needs to be on the agenda.
Well, I'll look at it because we got a real full, busy agenda. I'll look at it and see what's the thing we need to put on there
Charles?
and pick out. Yes.
Charles? As Ruben. Yeah, on the rate changes, let's just wait. I mean, I know we were just gonna hear this guy out tonight. Let's let the council think about it, what we heard today, and just go from there. I mean, let's not, let's just wait a little bit until we get that.
That's not
Yeah,
a discussion that needs to be made just between 2 or 3 people. That needs to be a full agenda item.
Yeah, because we're the city council. I mean, there's five of us, and that's what we need to be knowing what's going on. So we need to hold off on the rate changes and how we're going to discuss how we're going to do the rate. So let's hold off a little bit until we do our little homework on it.
I mean,
just thought y'all might have some questions that I could answer.
That'll be on the next meeting when we discuss about it, and then we'll go from there. Right now, let's just hold off right now.
It's probably, I mean, the rate change is gonna have to happen. I mean, that's gonna have to happen to pay for our debt regardless. So
Hey,
we
Mayor Charles.
can have a special meeting for that, if that's what you guys want.
Charles.
Yes.
Hey, just ask you a question. Is our RO system going? Is it running?
No.
Why not?
Well, Renee, you can answer that.
Wait, wait,
The
hold on,
state
hold on.
is,
Wait, Charles, you don't know why it's not running?
Yeah, I know why. I mean, we
Okay,
waiting on
I'm
the
asking you.
TCEQ.
I'm asking you, why is it not running? I'm asking you, I'm not asking Renee.
That's why it's not running. We're waiting on TCEQ to tell us when to do it. We can't do it. We can't cut it on until we go through all of the tests.
Because we raised raised the water bill because of the RO system, and it's not running. And now we're talking about sewer rate going up double, and we're gonna do that again. I mean, come on now. I mean, we gotta
That's
do one
that,
step at a time.
Ruben. In order to pay for this wastewater system you're putting in, that's why this is going up. Now, the RO system, the reason we can't turn it on until we get permission from TCEQ.
we're still making payments, even though it's not running. We still have to pay the Texas
Well-
Water Development Board.
That doesn't make sense. Why we're making payment not running? People are asking, why is it not running? And we're paying the water for it.
Because the state wants some test run on it and they're not ready because of all the COVID and because
Renee,
of some
that
technical
happened before.
difficulties.
It wasn't running before the COVID. It wasn't running before the COVID. So
Yes,
that's
it
why we-
was. It has been running. It has run. It has run. And they ask us to turn it off until they can make their own determinations. We have proved that it works. They just won't let us run it until they get one of their people down here whose name is Steve Walden, and he is our consultant. And because of all the things that have been going on, they can't come down here. And the guy that comes from Canada can't come down here. So we have been held up.
Why
I
can't
can't
they
make
come
them
down
do
here?
it.
Okay, wait a minute. I'm sorry. Why can they not come down here? I flew
Because they
from
will not-
Lubbock to Vegas to Houston. Flights are open. People can get here. Sorry.
Yes, they can now, but at the time that we were supposed to start this up in March, they shut us down.
Okay, can we get them down now? I mean, can you make that call tomorrow? Okay, we need somebody down now.
I can do
Well,
my best.
hold on just a second. This meeting is not for that. We can't talk about that. We gotta wait until we have a special meeting. If you want to talk about that, we gotta do it at a time we put it on the agenda. That's not on the agenda.
Sorry.
I make a motion that we adjourn. We're done for tonight. We adjourn and we'll wait till next week.
I'll second it.
Go ahead.
Motion been made and second to adjourn. Meeting adjourned.